No Doubt Fatherhood podcast. Welcome back. We're covering a topic today that we've touched on lightly, but have not yet gone into a ton of depth on. It is around sobriety. It's something that plays a big role in both of our lives. We both got there very different ways. I essentially always have been. Cole has, tried a few different paths there and has been sober for a long time. Either way, we've kind of ended up in a similar place. And for us, it's a part of the example that we want to set. So we'll kind of talk about our personal journeys there, why we think it's important for our example that we set, and being mindful that this is a pretty personal topic, right? A lot of people out there listening are probably like, hey, I drink a couple of beers a day after work. Like, who cares? And I don't want people to hear this and think that we are judgmental about this. We're going to kind of go through, again, our personal stories and rationale here and share it. And if it resonates, great. If you think, F these guys, fine, but.
Yeah. And also, like, hopefully, in our culture nowadays, it's all about like ghosting people and writing them off. Like, we hope that we and you as a listener have the maturity to be like, you know what? I'm not into this topic of theirs. I don't agree with them on this, but we don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Maybe, hopefully we're providing topics and things to think about that are helpful. And then every now and again, we may come up with something that you're like, no, I don't think that's the right move in fatherhood, right? And hopefully we have enough goodwill built up that people could be like, all right, cool. Don't agree with that one. Throw that one out, but I'm going to take the good, Yeah.
Or you like the first 4 episodes, and this is where you get off the train. You're like, screw these guys, I was down with the fitness and emotional development stuff, but this is cross the line.
It's probably better to get off the train early, because it's like,
we'll do more of this. So yeah, that's probably right.
Yeah.
Well, where do you want to start? Do you want to start with kind of just?
I think let's just get statistics out of the way so that like they kind of know where we're coming from. Right. Okay. So why don't you articulate what you mean by you being sober, and then I'll do a little bit about mine just so they kind of know, our backgrounds.
My stats are, I've never drank before in my life. I always knew that it was a bad idea for me. I have a very intense personality, doesn't come across on camera or my voice, but I am someone that gets very addicted to stuff. I get very into stuff. Never drank, always knew I knew myself well enough when I was 15, 16 to know not a good idea.
And when you say never drank, do you mean you've never had a drink, you've never tried any drugs, the full-on sobriety?
I was going to say I've puffed a joint twice in my life, not even enough to get high, honestly.
Okay.
But it was like, at a party, just standing in a circle type of deal. So I wouldn't say I've been high that way either. Mm-hmm. But that's the only exception for me.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. Okay, cool. And so real long story short, on my side, I got addicted to drugs and alcohol in my late teens, early 20s. I had some life events. Some things in life didn't go the way I was hoping they would go. And I felt very depressed and bummed on that loss, again, through the lens of this is a massive grief event for a young guy to not, have things go his way. So anyway, I got deeper and deeper into drugs and alcohol, and then I ended up getting sober in a 12-step program at 21 years old. And since going to that program, I've never had a drink or another drug. So I've been sober now for 22, 23 years, something like that. I don't keep track anymore, but 23 years of sobriety, somewhere around there is where I'm at. So obviously my adult life has been looked at through the lens of one day at a time, just being completely sober. So that's kind of my side where I'm coming
So
from.
Worth saying, obviously this is before both of us had kids, right?
Yes. Good point.
For different reasons. But we both continue to make the choice as parents that we will not be doing that, right? That this is a lifetime decision for us. And we've had to reevaluate this multiple times throughout our lives, right? So for me, I grew up in the hardcore punk rock world. There's a concept of straight edge in that world. That's pretty popular, where people don't drink or do drugs. And, it's like the 3 X's. I always considered myself straight edge. I don't so much anymore, just because I don't connect to that particular concept as much as I used to. Mm-hmm. I still decide to not drink and do drugs in the 39-year-old version of my life. Again, for different reasons than when I was 15, but it's for me now about the example that I want to set for our kids. And we'll get into the nuances of that and how we think about that. But have there been milestones for you where you've kind of had to reevaluate, or has it just been like cold turkey, 21 years old and beyond? Like, was there ever a concept that, hey, I might revisit this one day?
So, no, it's never been like that for me. So, and I want to get into this too, real quick. If you're listening, everyone's on a different part of their journey. So some people may have already tuned out and been like, this isn't the episode for me. I don't have a problem. Other people it may be very clear to them that they have a problem with drugs and alcohol. Other people may just, partake in it a little bit and be like, yeah, I don't have a problem. It's working for me. And so, again, like you were saying before, we're not the moral authority. It's up to you what you want to do. But I do challenge people, if you're listening this far and you've clicked on this title because you're interested in this topic, I want to challenge you, if you're listening to this, to not compare your drug use and your drinking with anyone else. So in other words, I don't want you to compare your drinking and drug use to your friend that just got their third DUI, or Uncle Larry who, has taken drug addiction to the very depths of hell. I want you to really, through a lens of, nope, I'm not comparing any other story. I'm really listening to these guys to see if it is working for me and me alone. Yeah. Okay. And the reason I say that is because when I got to this 12-step program when I was 21, there was jokes where people were like, I dropped more alcohol on the ground in the bar than you drank, kid. You're 21. What do you know about alcohol and drug addiction, right? And luckily that was not the people around me, but that you had heard those stories. The point being is, if I were to compare my situation and what I had lost at that point in my life to like some 50-year-old that was like homeless, dude, I would lose that comparison every time. And that comparison would have robbed me of the opportunity to get sober, because I would have had to walk out there and go add more to my story. And you know what I mean? And I am so grateful that like these wise, loving, kind people in the rooms were like, dude, how do you feel inside? I'm like, I'm broken inside and I think I'm going to die. They're like, great, welcome. Yeah. Stop right now if you want to. It wasn't this like pecking order and this comparison. Yeah. I don't know, honestly, if I would be alive if people would have compared to me, minimized my stuff, and then had me go out there, because I'm competitive as hell. So if you wanted to like challenge me to compete in the race to the bottom, I probably would have went out and done that, and who knows where I'd be. I've lost a lot of friends. Like over this 23 years of sobriety, I've buried a lot of friends, good men, and women. And it's heartbreaking to me because this thing kills us, So anyway, I just wanted to mention that to the listener. Please, please, please don't compare to anybody other than, yourself.
Yeah.
So anyway, that being said, when I got into the rooms, they were like, hey, dude, you should probably think about this. Is your life unmanageable? And it was clearly unmanageable. And it was also like, hey, do you drink like other people, and do you use drugs like other people? And it was like, not really. Like when I start, I can't stop. Crazy stuff happens to me. I make really bad choices. And all those things led me to, I have a problem, and one day at a time, I should probably abstain from those things completely.
Yep. And,
believe it or not, I know this is a crazy thought, but like my life improved one day at a time when I didn't partake in those things. So, I would say by 5 years of sobriety, I was like, this is how I want to live my life. And certainly by 10 years of sobriety, I was not entertaining the thought of having reservations like one day I would just drink like a regular person, because my life was improving so much, and I started embracing and enjoying reality versus running from it and trying to buffer it. And so, honestly, I can't tell you that like drugs and alcohol have been for a long time some like, one day I'll do that, right? Yeah. Now, trust me, I can dream up other ways to ruin my life and get in the way of me. It just hasn't been alcohol or drugs for a long time, if that makes sense.
Yeah. How would you, I think the tricky part about this topic is, especially drinking, it's so common. It's something that a lot of people do do in moderation, right? So there are people out there that will just have a couple beers after work or at dinner or whatever. How do you pick apart when this is worth looking at? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
is it worth looking at for everyone, in your opinion? Is it something that you should only look at if you feel a certain way? Like, what in your mind is the criteria where, hey, you should take a harder look at this?
Yeah. Well, I think there's several different angles to look at this, right? So, for instance, without a shadow of a doubt, I fought more with my romantic partner. I fought with her way more when we were drinking, and when we were doing drugs. So you could look at it through the lens of, is this affecting your marriage? Is it affecting your relationship with your kids? And so I think it's definitely a personal question, right? I think me and you, though, if you asked me, has being sober, like sober, has that helped me evolve and keep kind of reaching the potential that I have? And I would tell you, yeah. Like, I think that for me, alcohol and drugs and stuff would only get in the way of me progressing to the guy I want to be, both for me and for my family. Like, there's no upside to me. We've talked about diet, we've talked about fitness. I think there's zero upside to you ingesting any of those things on the fitness side. And I think, again, on the relationship side, on the being present for those around you side, from the sleep side, from, again, for me, and again, we're extreme because we're like sober. But for us, I don't think there really is any upside to 2 beers a night or 1 beer a night, right?
Yeah.
But again, people could be listening to this and be like, nope, that's kind of my little medicine, and that's my one thing. And okay, cool. Like, one of the things that I wanted to talk about from the work I do, with the grief recovery work. And if you haven't heard the other episodes, just real briefly, like I have worked with thousands of people in hotel rooms for 4 days at a time, or on Zoom calls for 4 days at a time, looking at their most traumatic, hurtful, grief-stricken events in their life and helping them, sharing tools with them so that they can set themselves free of past pain and hurt from emotional stuff, right? So I've literally sat for 15 years with thousands and thousands of people all over the world looking at their hardest stuff, okay? And I've done a lot of work in that with my heart too. And in our work, we have a concept or a term called STERBs, okay? And that's just an acronym that stands for short-term energy relieving behaviors, okay? So my dad died a couple of years ago, and let's say, I'm watching my son play a baseball game and he hits a home run, and it hurts so deeply that, like, my dad can't be in the stands and we can't high five and him share that moment with us, right? And there's this tinge of pain because that can't be. So Cole, who's sober now, right? You know what Cole would want to do? Go to Dairy Queen and get a Blizzard, okay? Yep. Because I need a buffer from the reality of that pain and that hurt, that things can't be the way I wish they would have been, right?
Yeah.
And so I need to go and find a buffer between me and that pain. So I don't want us to only in this episode think about alcohol and drugs only. There are many, many things that are short-term energy relieving behaviors that we can do that buffer us from reality, okay? And trust me, when I put down the drugs and the alcohol, there was a lot of work I had to do to not just go find other buffers of life, because my default is to hide from reality. That's why I went way deep into it. That's probably why you intuitively knew I can't get into this stuff at all, right? It's like my favorite, like, there's a reason my favorite Disney movie growing up was Peter Pan, because the idea of the lost boys on an island with no reality and no, like, drama, I loved that. I was obsessed with it. And that's how I chased drugs and alcohol. I was always hanging out in random places with my buddies, like just getting into trouble, like just always running from real life. But anyway, you can do that with gaming. You can do that with fantasy football. You can do that with model building. You can do that with CrossFit. You could do that with lifting. Like, anything that you're doing to excess to run from, the pressures of life, the stressors of life, the pain from life, those can all be again, short-term energy relieving behaviors that we use to buffer. And, again, really bad things can happen from that. So I know we're focusing on sobriety from drugs and alcohol, and I'm all about it, but I want the listener to kind of expand their minds a little bit to like, what do I use to buffer reality? Because guess what? I'm teaching my kids that.
That's a great point. I mean, we kind of talked about this before the episode, but that just kind of sunk in for me where in the, I think it was the third episode, we talked about the kind of some of the grief work you do in more depth, right? And a big part of why that's important when you have kids is because you are showing them how to process emotion. They're going to learn that from you. And that's why it's important that you learn, right? This is similar because when you have kids, there's a lot of stress and short-term pain and energy that you are juggling all the time. Every day, dude. Like whether it's you're fighting with, you're having a disagreement with your spouse, or you're not sleeping, or your kids are being annoying. Like there's lots of stress, right? And so everyone listening to this absolutely experiences that and does something. And I'd be willing to bet everyone has their thing, dude. And so for some people, alcohol and drugs is on the menu. For me, it might be something different, right? But yeah, like whether it's literally just like eating crappy food or hitting some.
Look, for a lot of us, that's the one, right?
Yeah.
And then and then other ones, we're dealing with porn, and for other guys, they're dealing with gaming, and for other guys, they're dealing with violence, and so really the list goes on, right? I mean, we all know the stuff in modern society that we're struggling with. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
But this is, I think, getting ahead to why this is important is even if you hear this and you're like, oh, I like my beers or my whiskey or whatever, it's like ultimately you're road mapping for your kids how to navigate stress or pain or whatever. You're basically saying, hey, the way to deal with this is with that thing, right?
Yes.
Dad's stressed out. I see him drinking. Dad had a hard day at work. He's drinking, or he's smoking a weed pen, or he's having cookies, or whatever it is. Right. And so that's the blueprint that you're setting. 100%.
And I think that like probably the reason that we have kind of zeroed in on sobriety first is because look, like anybody that knows that's tried to quit smoking you're doing good up until Friday when you go to the bar.
Right.
And then what are you doing that night? You're chain smoking, right?
Yeah.
Because obviously we all know this, but alcohol, lowers inhibition, and human beings make a lot of mistakes behind alcohol. Same with your pot gummies and all this kind of stuff, right? And it's like, so it's a lot harder for me to even like keep in check my other STERBs if I have these things that are lowering my inhibition.
Yeah.
So it's almost like for us, again, I don't know if you agree, we haven't talked about this, but it's like for me, the foundation of trying to like combat all these other STERBs that we use in our life is like drugs and alcohol, because those make it infinitely harder to keep in check anything else you're trying to keep in check.
Totally. I mean, another example, I don't know if this fits into that framework. We're both pretty intense people. So where do I go when I'm stressed out or overwhelmed or whatever? It's anger. And I have a lot of anger and aggression right below the surface at all times,
Yes. Yeah.
And so if it's sleep deprivation or stress, it's anger. Like that's where I go.
Yes.
And so I know 100%, dude, if I was drinking, that's coming out, right? That's right.
100%.
That's right there. And it's just like, that's just one example of a place that I go, to kind of manage that energy. I have a lot of that energy, just like that's why I enjoy lifting. I enjoy doing physical stuff. Like I have a lot of that. I would go there if I was drinking, I believe.
That's a great point. Absolutely. There's nothing to add for me on that. It keeps me in control. Because that's what I need. I need to be able to be in control, and these things take you out of control.
Yeah.
And again, some of the people I feel like bad for, friends of mine, are the people that have justified, well, it's just one joint at night, right? Because that can be very insidious too. The 2 drinks a night, or the 1 drink a night, or the one bowl a night smoking weed, or the 5 gummies. I know things have evolved now where everyone eats their weed. I got out of the game before that happened, but anyway, that can be insidious too, because that can really, in my opinion, just have this kind of flat existence. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Where it robs you of initiative. It robs you of like, maybe chasing that promotion or evolving a little bit or being comfortable with public speaking or, again, fill in the blank. But a lot of the time that like, it's not a house fire, but that one drink a night can really like prevent you from ever like building an add-on to your house, if that makes sense.
It doesn't fit into the portfolio of activities that's making you better, right? So it's
Yeah.
like uncommon. I can't think of any friends off the top of my head where they're actively pursuing trying to get in better shape or self-develop in a meaningful way, but they're also kind of like drinking every night or, whatever that looks like. That just usually doesn't fit in. And I think you're right in that it's like, if you take away all that stuff, like this is something that I try to live with where, for instance, I don't look at my phone a lot when I'm with our kids, right? With our family. That's kind of challenging sometimes because you could say that's one of those STERBs, right?
Oh,
Where
dude,
like,
it's one of the most prevalent in the world.
Yeah.
Like I will say that right now. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, so
You're on a good train of thought.
stuff's hard. Whip out the phone, just kind of ices the stress a little bit.
It buffers us from reality.
Yeah, so when you start to take those buffers away, dude, that is hard, man. And I just we're picking on drinking. It's a really common one, but that does prevent you from looking at the kind of bare version of yourself in reality of like, man, why am I so anxious? Like, why don't I feel good around my family or at home, or why do I, you know what I mean? Like it kind of takes away that opportunity to feel what it's like to just kind of be naked with, hey, I'm not distracting myself with anything right now. How do I feel? And kind of, what is that version of me? Is it good?
Yeah. I know. I love that. Another piece of this puzzle that I just want to say for the audience is like, I don't know about you, but for me, we got into this a little bit in one of the other episodes, but my dad was in recovery too. So my dad was a recovering alcoholic. And thank God for me, he got sober before I was born. So he died a couple years back, right? So I had him for my entire childhood and a lot of my adult life. And that dude was the foundation of our family. He was a rock. He was stability, right?
Yeah.
So I never once went to him, whether it was a good day or a bad day, or I needed guidance, or I just wanted to say what's up to him. There was never one time that he didn't look at me in the eye, dead sober, and be like, what do you need?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that is such a gift to give to your children, right? And so that's why another piece of this was when I went down the road of alcoholism and drug addiction, it felt so wrong to me. It felt so foreign to me, even though every part of my body was like yearning to go in that direction. Yeah. It felt so wrong because I had such a strong example as a father of like, no, dude, that's how not the dudes in your life are. My cousin Brad, like shout out to Brad. I love that guy. He's like a brother to me. Like he didn't drink really. He was always there and stable and solid. And so I'm grateful that I had men in my life that were straight up anchors. You know what I mean? And so I very early on was like, oh, that's a man right there, right? Unmovable, unshakable, steady, right? And like, let's face it, guys, our wives are looking for that in us. Our kids are looking in that for us. And so you can say it's just one beer a night. Okay. But when you quantify that out over 10 years or 15 years, in my opinion, that is instability. Right.
Yeah.
And that's us trying to course correct or buffer, right? Or whatever. And it's like, I remember going over to some of my buddies' houses and their dads were drinking and their dads were a little bit unsteady. I could pick it up because I was around sober people. And it just felt like, oh shit, like that's how your home is. And these were nice dads. These were coaches of mine. Like, but even the subtleness of like a little bit of unsoberness was uneasy for me. Right. And so I don't know. I just wanted to put that out there for people looking at different perspectives, because we don't all have the perspective, like that's perspective of a sober member in your house growing up.
Well, with your dad, that's a really direct example of why it's important and the example you set. So you have a personality that's drawn to stuff like that, right? Like you can become addicted to things. Like, what if your dad didn't get sober? and you didn't have that example.
Mm-hmm.
Even though you went down that road knowing he was sober, you, first of all, from the beginning, you knew, hey, this isn't right. This feels weird.
Mm-hmm.
But what if you didn't have the model of your dad being sober, right? You just kind of would have been like, do you think you would have ended up in AA if your dad hadn't gone through it?
That's really hard to answer. Here's what I will tell you. There are two very defined kind of like pathways for men in my family. My grandfather, my uncle, there's the pathway of like drugs and alcohol, until you die of some sort of alcohol related thing, or you find sobriety and then you can like have an opportunity to go and live like a fulfilling, happy life. Like I had enough of those examples to see like, hey, there's two paths here for you, so I have no idea where I would be.
Yeah.
Because again, it's like there's multi-generations of men in my past who like they grew up getting the shit beat out of them by their dad, or their dad was sober in my case, but I have cousins and other guys who had very different results with the other, dads in my line. Right. So I have no idea where I would be if I didn't have him as an example. But I know this: I want to be that for my kids, and that's where there's no messing around. Because that's the other thing too. Like I also have friends who got sober with me young in AA, right? And then at certain times they justified a drink or two, right? And I'm friends with some of those guys to this day, right? And to me, their pathway, their trajectory as guys, their growth was way, way more impressive when they were sober, versus they convinced themselves to have a couple microbrews, on the weekends. And then it's some pot gummies. And then it's more isolation in your gaming room upstairs. And then it's like more of a gut. And you're a little bit more pasty white than you would be looking like E.T.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like that shit breaks my heart. Because these dudes that I was hanging with in their 20s were freaking on a path like this to have anything they wanted in life, and there was nothing going to stop them. And then that convincing of, no, I deserve a beer at night or on the weekends or whatever the justification is, like I saw the trajectory change massively. Now, what's insidious is in their life, it maybe didn't feel that way or look that way, but I know, like, you know what I'm saying? I don't want that for my friends. I certainly don't want that for my kids. And that's where it's just like, it's insidious. Like that's the word I would use for drugs and alcohol.
I mean, dude, we're not even talking about the health component of it, but how shitty is beer for you? Like if that's what you're doing, like, I mean, I know a ton of guys that love beer and like breweries and stuff like that. Dude, it's probably one of the worst, like donuts and beer are probably like two of the worst things, just like objectively speaking. It's just like, I'm not an expert on all the different ways it jacks you up, but yeah, if you want that ET body, I think beer's gonna put you on the fast track.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah,
and and again, right? We talk about this all the time, but we're up against so many things that our ancestors were not up against, right? Like, I don't know if Sam will approve it, but like, I want to have a blue light episode one of these days. I want to have like us turning into vampires living indoors versus like how we were designed to live outdoors. Like, there are so many things we're up against, and it's like, and we keep getting older, right? Yeah. So you can't tell me at 40 your hangovers aren't different than 20, right? You can't tell me that your liver can process what it could when you were 30 or 20, but we convince ourselves we can, right?
Yeah.
And it won't hurt, and everyone's asleep, and I'm just gonna have my little drink ski, and it's like, okay, but again, like you said, to the body, what is happening inside of us, right? It's like there's a reason we're all dying of heart disease and cancers and all these kind of things. And it's like, dude, you can't tell me like that. And again, I don't know. I never resonated with that nonsense where it's like 1 glass of wine a day is great for heart health. Like that always felt like a psyop to me, and it's like, but again, we're biased. I get it. We're biased. But I think our hope today is to just challenge our listeners. Do not compare to extremes. Could your life be better? Could your trajectory be better? Could your marriage be better? Could your connection with your kids be better if you were sober?
Yeah.
And I mean sober. And you may say, no, it can't. Okay, cool. But I know for me and you, it's a foundation of who we are. and I wouldn't trade it for the world.
It's also, we talked about in the last episode, the bar is set pretty low in society for what dad should be. And this is one of those things that's kind of part of the like starter pack, you know, like the Homer Simpson I'm a dad starter pack. And I think this is why I don't judge people, is because depending on how you're raised, depending on your influences, we've both been lucky to have some inflection points or some positive influences that took us off of that path in different ways. But dude, if you don't ever have that and you never think critically about it, drinking's just part of the starter pack. And the like, I deserve a few beers after a long day of work, is that comes with it. And so I think some people don't even know that maybe it's not a good thing. They just don't even question it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's part of it too, is we in our own lives, in our friendship, in this show, are trying to kind of to set a different standard, to say, here's kind of what we're going for here, right? Like we think that we should be physically fit and emotionally fit. And we should, in this example, we think that, hey, we want to be sober for our families. That's not the natural thing. And so for anyone that in any of those areas isn't where they want to be, I'm not like, oh, what's wrong with you? I totally get how people get there, you know, so I'm sympathetic to that.
100%, you know, and I'll just say this, like, I feel like one of the things that we're trying to do on this podcast is be transparent and come at this with humility. So, you know, I struggle, like my kids have been negatively affected growing up as a father by my anger. I have given them poor examples. Again, when I go to STERBs, like eating like shit to mask my sad feelings, they had front row seats to, oh, that's how daddy's dealing with that. Right.
Sure.
And there's like, and again, we're going to have entire episodes, I want to anyway, on stuff we struggle with. So we're not the moral authority here. All we're saying is like, we have somehow in different ways found a way that sobriety works great for us. And then we're making plenty of mistakes as we go too, as fathers, right? Like there's one major action that we do in the grief recovery method, and it's called the relationship graph. And so, you know, I would basically graph my entire life with my dad when he died, like from the very first conscious memory I have of my dad all the way to the day he died. I would graph all the happy events, all the sad events, and I would get what we call a very accurate memory picture of the totality of the relationship, right? And what I'm shooting for when my kids graph me, which I hope they will, I'm shooting for a bunch of stuff above the line, but guess what? There's going to be plenty below the line because I'm a human being. Yeah. And there's going to be ways I hurt them. There's going to be ways where I didn't show up as a good example, like guaranteed. And I'm just doing the best I can as kind of a, you know, as a human being stumbling along this life. I'm just trying to limit as much below the line as I can. And, you know, so again, right, we're not the authority. We don't think we're the most awesome dads. Like, trust me, I got a whole list of ways I've not shown up as the best dad in my life. But I think both of our hearts are in the right place, which is like, dude, guys specifically are hurting in this day and age. The suicide rates are astronomical. The drug use, the addiction, the ways we're dying, the morbidity. We're getting put through the meat grinder, and me and you, our hearts hurt for it, and we would just want to help fellow guys who are just trying to navigate. Again, being a dad and a husband in 2025, like, dude, that's some like next level shit. That is not easy stuff, right?
I think this will come up different ways, but something we've talked about is we don't live in the world now that we grew up in.
Yes.
So I think there's this tendency to want to repeat the way that we were raised because that's what we did.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's sometimes to justify it. I don't know. But I think there's this sense of like, well, we went to school a certain way, so we want our kids to go to school so they have the same experience as I did. Or I want them to whatever. But, you know, we've both made pretty intentional decisions around, we both live in Northern Idaho, mm-hmm. which is not by mistake, right?
Yep.
We both homeschool our kids, not by mistake. And the reason being for some of those things is like, it's not the same world it was.
Well, let's keep going farther, okay? We also don't let our kids have access to the internet. We are very, very guarded in how much screen time they're getting. There are quite a few ways that we are specifically guarding our children against, I would just say, the predatory nature of being a parent in 2025. We've talked about this before. The media wants access to your kids. Big pharma wants access to your kids. Creepers and pedophiles want access to your kids. Again, fill in the blank, right? Who doesn't want access to your kid's mind, their heart, their soul? Like, if we're not on the same page here, like, I don't know what to tell you. You know what I mean? Like, you have to be so defensive and protective of your children. And I mean, I'm so glad you brought this up, because you're right. This is the cop-out. Like, it infuriates me when my friends say stuff like, well, we survived somehow as kids, so I'm going to let them do the same thing. It's like, oh, really, homie? Like, did we have fentanyl just like lurking in the park in Spokane? Like, should my kid be licking the railing here? Because we're not in Kansas anymore, right?
Exactly,
I mean, that's an extreme, but like, we could fill in the blank anywhere. Like, did you have access to an iPad and like YouTube and algorithms feeding your kids like 10 hours of screen time per day? Because I know you didn't have that, and I didn't either. Right. So anyway, I'm getting fired up right now, but.
Well, you mentioned why, like, that's an example of why it's important in this context, which is maybe when you're in high school and you're, our age or 30s, 40s, you partied when you're in high school or college, and it was innocent. Like, you went to like a kegger and got drunk, or you smoked weed with your friends. And that was like the worst thing that could happen, is maybe you got like a DUI or got in a fight at a party. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it was kind of like, it was bad, like bad things could happen. But it wasn't like people were just like dying for no reason because there was like fentanyl and like whatever pill they took, or like, stuff has gotten weird, dude. Like, in the last couple decades, like, it's gotten way different than when we were younger. So like, that's just one example of like, if I'm showing my kids, hey, part of my existence and how I process reality is I kind of need drugs and alcohol to help me do that. And that's in my kids' toolkit. Well, guess what else they're going to be exposed to that they weren't, or that we weren't, right? Stuff like fentanyl. Like, that's an actual risk now. It's like, you could just do whatever gummy or normal like drug you would have taken 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And you just die.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that happens all of the time.
Yep.
So yeah, like, what world are you opening up for your kids?
Well, and look, I mean, it's like, and we'll cite this. Sorry, Sam, I'm gonna make you put a link. We'll cite this, but there's a study, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but we'll put the study down. And it's like, I think in 2001, between drug, alcohol, and suicide, okay, there was like 70,000+ Americans died around 2001. That's right around when I was going through college, okay? Now, in 2022, okay, that number has jumped 143%, and there are over 200,000 people dying per year of suicide, drugs, and alcohol, right? So 70 some odd thousand to 200,000, okay, on those things. We haven't even got into suicide. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like, and so anyway,
Totally.
I hate to say this, but again, like, are we doing a service to anyone listening if we don't say this? Like, there are a lot of people like trying to kill you, out there, corporations, governments. Like, I hate to say it, but if you actually look at this stuff and pay attention, a lot of people want you dead. Now, again, I don't know why that is. We can all have our own theory on why that is, but like, again, why do I listen to country music, cruising through Idaho with my country music? Why is every single song talking about processing your pain and your breakups through alcohol?
Yeah.
Why is every song that's on the radio about drinking alcohol to deal with life?
Yeah.
Why
Dude,
can't I,
since the beginning of the genre, you know what I mean? Like, 90s country, 2000s country. Now the biggest artists would be like Morgan Wallen.
Mm-hmm.
Find me one Morgan Wallen song without the word whiskey in it.
Yep.
It's every single song, dude.
Every single song.
And listen, what's the other guy that everyone likes and it's like sad? Zach Bryan.
Yep.
Every song, there's some mention of like Klonopin or, like something.
100%.
It's just, yeah.
Well, and
Crazy.
again, right, like let's go to every genre, right? Look at rap and hip hop, right? It's all about like dominance, violence, and drugs,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, and then shows shows, movies, what do they make? How do they portray all this stuff? Right? It's like, it's so funny because it's like their stance a long time ago was like, we need to take smoking out of film to make sure people don't die of lung cancer, right? It was like, that was their one stand of all time in Hollywood.
Yeah.
It's like, let's take cigarettes out of film. And it's like everything else is fair game, not only fair game, but like actively promoted at every turn. And again, right now, you know why we have to be guarded with media with our kids, right? Now you know why I have to actually like censor their playlists. You know, it's like you cannot do. And by the way, in 2001 and 2002, they were working as best they had with the tools they had then to mess us up too. Don't get, you know, I don't want to, you know, we all know that. So anyway, it's like the stakes are just higher now, like yep. I think you said, right? And so, and again, if you, as lovingly as I can say this, if you're a dad out there and you think these views are crazy, you know, then this is probably not the podcast for you. And that's fine. You know, I'm sure you can go find another podcast that you feel is like more, I don't know, reasonable. But in the line of work that I work in, I'm working with the mothers and the fathers who are grieving the loss of their child that they should not have had to put in the ground.
Yeah.
I'm working with mothers who have an adult child that's on the street that they don't know where they are. They don't know if they're dead or not, right? And I see the heartbreak in that mom's eyes, and I try and help her the best I can with these tools that we share with her. You know, I like, because like going back to your original question, the richness of my life, the beauty of the marriage that Ashley and I have worked hard to where we're at. My 4 kids trust me, and they look in my eyes and they know who's there. Do you think I'm going to ever gamble with any of that so I can have a little brewski, you know, on the lake?
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, oh, those pot gummies sound really fun. Am I going to risk all that I've built and I have for like a quick feeling of like, oh, you know, like there's no way. So,
and dude,
anyway.
I mean, the way I think about it, and going back to how do I justify this now and think about it now? Because again, like I have never gone through that type of addiction. There's totally a reality where I somehow get to the conclusion of like, you know what, I'm 40, you know, like I'm going to treat myself to some wine or a beer. Like I've gotten this far, like things are pretty settled down now. Like I could get there in an alternate reality.
Yeah.
Part of why I don't is because it is hard enough as it is to be a good dad, a good husband, like daily struggles in both of those. How is being drunk or being hungover going to help me there? Mm-hmm. Right. So like hard enough as it is, now I'm bringing my kind of barrier down, like my judgment down. I'm maybe not thinking my best. I'm not feeling my best. It's hard enough as it is, dude. And so like, again, you've experienced this more than me. My perception is like when you drink, it's not just that night. It's like you feel it the next day. Like it takes a while to wear off, right? Like you're not going to think and feel the same. Mm-hmm. I don't need anything else working against me, you know, like it as it is. Like,
yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's great because you're right? We're thinking, we're coming at it from a different angle, right? I'm thinking, because I told Ashley, I said, no matter how charming I am or manipulative I am, because I can be both of those things, the day you see me drinking or using drugs, you take the kids and you leave me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I know I can string you along for a while, right? But trust me, it's all going to crash and burn, and you need to bail, you know? And I've had to guide friends of mine and their loved ones through this. And I've seen that, you know, I've seen it to where it's like some innocent partner is now watching their guy smoke crack in front of them. You know what I mean? And it's like, again, you can go to the extremes of these stories, or you can just be like, you know what? I don't think I have a problem, but am I going to play with my kids? One thing I love about you, Sam, is you are such a hands-on dad with your young kids, much more than me. I really respect that about you, and you're much better and you're much more patient than I am with young kids. And I love that about you, dude. And dude, if you're milking some hangover or you had 2 beers and you
right.
got shitty sleep, like You're not going to be on your game like I see you being on your game. I've been sober 23 years and I can't still do it, right? Anyway, my point is you're totally right. No matter where you fall on this spectrum, as we get older, our body flat out cannot process alcohol like it used to, and you're not bouncing back like you used to, and it is not a net positive. I can't think of one way where really when we look at this biologically, there's any positiveness to it.
And that's the reality of what it all comes back to for me. So it's like, again, I don't judge people for where they are and the decisions they've made, but make an argument to me where it's helping you as a dad or a husband, drinking or doing drugs or whatever it is. Like, please, like I'd be genuinely curious to hear the argument, because the only arguments I could think of have some kind of self-centered underpinning where it's like, hey, I need to take the edge off. I need a break. I need to feel better. Right. Yep. And so like I cannot spin up that argument in my head of, hey, by drinking, by smoking a weed pen or eating weed gummies, I'm helping my family. One that people might say, which I get, this one is actually kind of nuanced. Like, I do have friends that have crazy anxiety. They have crazy stuff in their past, crazy like nervous system stuff. They do like weird THC, CBD gummy type of stuff, and they claim that helps them a lot. And so I don't know about that. You know what I mean? Like, that's to me a gray area where like they might be doing pharmaceutical drugs as an alternative, and I don't love that idea either. So like, I think there are gray areas. I'd love to hear if someone has some kind of pro argument for that stuff. But for me, when I look at the landscape, I'm like, I don't see any path here where this is going to be additive to me in the places I care most about right now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, really well said. And I want to circle back to the concept that we introduced earlier, which is short-term energy relieving behaviors. So again, you may just not be thinking about drugs or alcohol, but the takeaway is what are we doing in our lives? Because here's the deal. This is my belief. You as a father, right, is more important than anyone else in your family. I think it's more important than your wife. It's obviously more important than your kids right now. But I think it's paramount that you as a father are brutally honest with your self-assessment of your strengths and your weaknesses, your blind spots, you know what I'm saying? Like, this podcast, right? Like, we're truly trying to move the needle in terms of helping men, right? And so we need to be brutally honest with our self-assessments.
Yeah.
I think that we've talked about this before. Like, we've seen guys go down really, really horrible paths and choices they've made that have destroyed their family.
Yeah.
Because they sold themselves a bag of lies, right? And they were not honest with what their pitfalls were, what their shortcomings were, where they needed to evolve, right? And the whole family suffers because of that, Yeah. And so anyway, why am I saying that? Because like it or not, if you're, and this is one of mine, and this is why I've got to fix it. You mentioned it, right, with the phone, but it's like the phone, the screen time, the suicide rates in children go up the more screen time they have.
It's like a direct correlation.
Right? Yeah. And so we keep coming back to drugs, alcohol, but again, that other thing that we talked about, suicide, which is in that percentage, right? That stuff is all going up, right? So it's like, just figure that out as a dad. Like, where are my STERBs? What are the buffers I have to reality? And my kids have front row seats to, that's how you deal with the stressors of life.
Yeah.
And figure out like how likely is that to end up killing one of your kids in some brutal way? Like, it's hard to say that, but like, that is the stakes of this game.
I mean, dude, if you think in terms of risk profiles, so what's the risk of me not getting into shape as a dad? It's what we've talked about, right? I might not be as energetic, or I'm not going to be as healthy. I probably won't be around as long. I might not set a great example for my kids. They might be unhealthy. Like, there's a lot of risk there. Mm-hmm. To me, there's an unacceptable risk of drugs and alcohol because of that exact reason, which is the downside risk is basically you die. Like, it's like it goes all the way to death pretty easily, right? So it's like, you can't just dabble a little bit, if you are showcasing that to your kids, you're opening up the door to where that is the worst case scenario in a very realistic way.
Yep.
And so that's another part for me. Again, like this is something that when we started the podcast, I don't think we even had as like a focal point. And as we've been getting into it, I am realizing it is a bigger deal, because in the kind of total package of the example that we want to set, that to me is an unacceptable risk, that I am doing something that my kids could take on that would result potentially in their death or their destruction of their life or their family. Like that's not an abstract concept.
Yep.
You know, so like, yeah, like all these things we talk about are very important and dramatically affect the quality of your life. But this is one I think kind of flies under the radar.
Yeah.
I don't hear a lot about this topic, probably because people don't want to hear about it, honestly.
Of course not.
Yeah, like people don't want to hear it. Most people, I mean, just talking to Raquel when we first started doing this, she's like, you guys should talk about that because, you know, most dads drink or do something.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I guess you're right, dude, because we don't talk about it a ton. It's something that I just have always had and I've already decided is, you know, the right thing for me. And as you have 23 years ago, right? But
yeah, but also let's even look at that, dude. I think we were friends for like, I want to say a straight up maybe a year before I actually knew you had never had a drink before.
Yeah.
Like we had been friends a long time before we even talked about this. But guess what? When I'm like, who's a steady friend of mine? Who will be there if I need him to? Who, you know, again, if I die, who would I prefer my kids to be raised by, right? And it's like, oh, magically it's one of my homies that is sober.
Yeah.
You know, like,
yeah,
dude, your kids need that. They need that from you, right? It's like you're up for a promotion and you're against 3 other guys. I don't know what it is about Sam, but that dude always seemed very steady, very balanced, very pragmatic. Oh, wow. He never drinks, right? There's not that hole in his game. So, again, I think at this point, right, we're beating a dead horse a little bit.
As we will many times.
Yeah, but just something to think about, right? Just something to think about in terms of don't compare yourself to others, because then you'll be like, yeah, I'm not selling my I'm not selling my butt on the street, you know, so I'm fine. And it's like, well, maybe don't compare to somebody that went there with it, right? Maybe just compare to it. Are you being the best you can be for your wife and your kids?
Yeah.
You know?
And dude, again, I come from the punk rock world. It's like, to me, you know, whether it was what I felt when I was 15 or 16, when I was getting into that music, or even now, like my perspective and my spirit hasn't changed in that way. So to me, what's the most punk rock thing to do as a 40-year-old dad? It's to not drink. It's to be healthy. It's to be a good dad. You know what I mean? It's like, that is the opposite of what everyone else is and wants you to be. Like the status quo is very much mediocrity, out of shape, ET body, you know, drinking beer, smoking weed. Like that's the norm, dude.
And consumption, Netflix,
consumption,
watching
totally.
stuff all the time, being entertained all the time, making sure your kids are entertained all the time because it's inconvenient as a parent.
Yeah.
I can't enjoy my dinner if these kids are actually having a conversation at the table, so let me just shove an iPad in their face. Right. You know, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so like, listen, I mean, we all end up in different places, different ways. To me, the same thing that led me to punk music when I was 15 led me to North Idaho, to raise our kids the way we're raising them, to do stuff like continuing to be sober, to, you know, be in shape, to, you know, actually kind of strip away stuff like TV. And like, I don't watch TV, dude. I don't watch Netflix. People are always like, have you seen this or that? I'm like, no, I haven't. They're like, oh, you should. I'm not going to watch it.
Yeah.
I've stripped that away.
Yep.
Like there's such a small window of time for me where I could do that, which, as we've talked about, is going to be the time that will take away from me working out or doing something else productive. So if I'm committed to all these things that we've talked about, I don't have time for that stuff. That is going against the grain. I like that. That's my personality. Like I will continue to do that. But for those listening that relate to that, I mean, consider what that looks like as a dad. Because to me, being sober fits into that pretty well.
Yep. Love it. Love it. I think we covered a lot of ground here. And again, if you're listening, we appreciate you tuning in, and we hope that you got something out of that episode, and tune in next time, and I'm sure we'll cover some other highly controversial topic. But again, right, our hope is not to be judgmental or think we know everything. We don't at all. But this is one place that has really served both of us well. Yeah. I think, and that's why we were passionate about talking about it, is like, this has been a cornerstone for me and you on how to stay married for a long time, and how to parent in a very congruent way that like doesn't allow other bullshit to seep in. Because that's the other thing too, is like, the more you're taking the pop brownies and the drink ski here and there, the more other things are seeping in, and you're not sharp enough to see it, or you're not sharp enough to take a stand and say no, like, or that's not how we want to do it, right? And so, let me say this too, right? I think it's important to say that like both of our wives drink.
That's a good point.
You know, and so I think just in terms of being transparent, it's like, maybe you wondered that, maybe you didn't as a podcast, but like Ashley drinks, Raquel drinks. I would say neither of them in my classification are anywhere near problem drinkers. Sometimes they can.
Well, our boat life is, beginning, and we're
going to have to get some B-roll of our wives overdoing it. And dude, it's kind of weird, right? But the majority of our friends circle, the guys are sober and the gals aren't. and we really are like the Baywatch. We're Baywatch, North Idaho. and no one is getting into trouble on our watch, right? Which is nice and very, very, like, I'm so grateful that the other dudes were there.
If we were all partying, it'd be sketchy.
Yeah. But, and again, I haven't really thought this through because this wasn't the premise of the podcast, right? But, I hate to say this, but do I think it would be better if both me and Ashley were sober all the time? Probably. But do I think it's more important that the husband and the father is sober in the relationship? Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
And I don't even know why, but I think it goes back to kind of, again, my childhood. And by the way, it's weird. My mom and dad were both sober. They actually met in the 12-step program and had me shortly after. That's a whole nother story about my epigenetics being messed up because of, anyway, long story short, as dads, I think we need to be that prototype rock steadiness, for our family, that foundational kind of, I don't want to say immovable object, but a lot of the time we do need to be immovable.
But let's be very clear. Does Ashley have a drink after a hard day here at home? No.
No, never.
Raquel doesn't drink all year long, except for like when she's on the boat with Ashley and our friends, right? Yep. Or they go out to dinner together, just them. The important thing to me is our kids are not seeing, like, just straight up, I can speak for both of, Raquel and Ashley. They are not using alcohol to process anything. It is purely they're partying, right? Like, that to me is different than what I'd be doing and what we talked about today. It is what it is. Like, there's no drinking in our house the entire year.
Yeah.
I don't think there's ever drinking in our house. Our kids don't see it. It is in those kind of on the boat, out to dinner settings. So
yeah. Yep. No, that's a great point. I wanted to throw that in there just because it's like, hey, it's like, this is our scenario and this is our situation. And so that's just another data point.
It is. And if you beef this episode, hit us up, let us know. If there's other stuff you want us to cover here, let us know. We're in like the double digit listeners right now. So,
we have 11 listeners.
So, hit us up if you got ideas or, again, if you have beef, let's talk. But yeah, thank you for listening.
Yep.
And we'll see you next time.